Welcome to Caribbean and Latin American News Now. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you would like, share, and subscribe the video. Very important that you like the videos and that you interact with the videos as soon as they are produced. YouTube has the rule that if you do not interact with them, that's the click-through rate, the click rate that they have, then they are not going to send the videos out. So it's very important as soon as the videos are released, and as soon as you see them, if you have time, that you watch them. And don't watch them for 2 seconds. Watch it throughout so that the algorithm will push the videos along. Very important that you do that. Now, in this afternoon's topic, we are going to look at the topic Caribbean Zone of Peace or Zone of War. Holness and Persad-Bissessar versus gangs and drug cartels. Very important topic that we would like to look at today. The Caribbean has long been branded as a zone of peace, but at the United Nations, Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Trinidad's not opposition, but Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar sent shockwaves by declaring a war on gangs and drug cartels. Is the Caribbean heading toward a dangerous new path? Are these leaders following in Donald Trump's footsteps with a hardline law and order approach? And what does this mean for Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and the wider region? In this video, we break down the UN speeches by Holness and Persad-Bissessar, why crime and gangs are now at the center of regional politics, the risk of turning the Caribbean from a zone of peace into a zone of war, whether Trump-style rhetoric is reshaping Caribbean leadership. Stay tuned. This conversation could redefine the Caribbean's future. Now, we hear Andrew Holness at the recently held United Nations session talking about launching a war on the gangs. Now, this is not his first time declaring such a war, and he has declared that war in his native Jamaica, of which he is Prime Minister, which he presides as Prime Minister, and also speaking about the fact that it's now time that we dismantle the gangs and that we eradicate all gang activities. Now, both Prime Ministers, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, and the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, they referenced what the situation in Haiti, rightfully so, about how the gangs have taken over the state. Andrew Holness mentioned that they are equipped with powerful weapons, the gangs, and that if the government is not careful, the governments of the region are not careful, then they are going to definitely dominate the government. But where are these gangs coming from? And who are supporting these gangs? These are the questions that we have to ask. And if we look at the situation in Haiti, we are going to see that many of the gangs are controlled by private interests, very powerful private economic interests. Very important that we understand that the oligarchs of Haiti, for the most part, control the gangs, along with global economic interests. These are factors that we have to be aware of and we must delve into. Now, the Gleaner opened up and carried a story yesterday, and I'm wondering why it's not opening this morning, and in which it says PM Holness calls for global war on gangs. Jamaica's Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness on Friday said that the crisis in Haiti has laid bare the truth of transnational criminal networks and the trafficking arms and narcotics, as he called for a global war on gangs to deal with the situation. So it's not just a domestic war on the gangs, but he's calling for a global war on the gangs. Addressing the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, that's the UNGA, Holness said that gangs are now global syndicates with resources that rival nation states. Holness, who is the current chairman of the 15-member Regional Integration Movement, CARICOM, said that the Caribbean has created regional security mechanisms, but these efforts alone cannot match the scale of the threat. And I quote from Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, quote, "What is needed is a united front with the same urgency, resources, and coordination the world has applied to terrorism." So this is what he's saying. What is needed is a united front with the same urgency, resources, and coordination the world has applied to terrorism. Only then we can turn the Caribbean and indeed the wide region into a true zone of peace. So in order to turn our zone into a zone of peace, we have to wage war on the gangs. That is what he's suggesting. Holness said that Jamaica has made significant progress in tackling gangs and reducing its homicide rate by more than 50% in recent years. So this is where they are taking us to. Remember now in the book that was written by George Orwell about the Orwellian state, he says that war is peace. So we're hearing now that our governments have to launch a war on gangs before we can be ushered in to the century of peace in the region. Now, what is peace? That is what we have to ask ourselves. What peace are they talking about? Because as I've suggested, a lot of times they know who the criminal networks are. Are they launching a war on the citizens of the country? Are they about to completely diminish and to erode our free rights, our civil rights, our free speech rights? Very important that we understand these things. And are the states of emergency the precursor to what lies ahead? Because, I've heard that the state of emergency in Trinidad, for example, which has not, it has not clamped down on the movement of people. But at the same time, why have you declared a state of emergency if it's not, clamping down on people's movements? Why the state of emergency? Another thing in Trinidad is that they have not really arrested any of these criminals. And if they do, many of them are the innocent ones. So this is what we have to understand, that these people are not serious about, criminal reduction, about dismantling criminal networks. Because in Jamaica, for example, Andrew Holness has yet not dismantled the garrison constituencies. And that is the center, that is the root cause of all gang-related activities in Jamaica. He has refused to do that because the garrisons are tied to politics. And many of our politicians have safe seats within these constituencies, within these garrisons, within these gang-related garrisons, within these gang-related garrisons. I want you to understand that they are infested with gangs. And our politicians know that, our business elites know that, and yet they do nothing about it. And now they're telling us that they're launching a war on gangs. And who are the gangs? The Gleaner itself reported many times that the gangs are in Gordon House, right there in Jamaica's parliament. The gangs of Gordon House. The Gleaner, the primary newspaper of Jamaica, has often written about that. If you check its archives, you will see numerous articles written by the Gleaner. So it's not coming from me, it's coming from the Gleaner. Very important that you understand that. Now, let me have you listen to a clip from Dr. Andrew Holness, in which he's suggesting that he is going to launch a war on the gangs. And then we're going to go over to Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, or Bissessar. Is that how her name is pronounced? Bissessar? Now, let us look at this clip here from Dr. Andrew Holness and his war on the gangs mantra.
Involved in cybercrime, trafficking arms, narcotics, people, organizing violence and destabilizing institutions are an existential threat to states. Gangs are now global syndicates with resources that rival nation states. Jamaica has made significant progress in tackling gangs and reducing our homicide rate by more than 50% in recent years. But we know that unless these networks are totally dismantled, our gains remain fragile. This is why we call for nothing less than a global war on gangs, a coordinated international campaign to cut off the flow of weapons, money, and the influence that sustains them.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew Michael Holness. But, Dr. Andrew Michael Holness did not speak about the fact that the guns are coming from the US and who is also behind the drug trafficking. Okay? These are not things that they would like to put to the fore. They're just suggesting that they're warring against a system that they control. Right? Now, does that even make sense? Is that even logical that you're fighting against your own mess? And then they're waging a war on us, on the mess that they have created. This is what I want you to understand. And for the life of me, it seems like many of our citizens in the Caribbean and the world at large have bought into what they are suggesting and into the agenda that they've set for us, because they dress in such nice suits, right? And they deliver very well, and they look clean and respectable. And you respect them. Okay? I have to really critique Mia Mottley's speech separately, because her speech was interesting in the sense that it's amazing how people are still blind to the global agenda. And Auntie Motley, she's talking great, and she's a liberator. But is she? Is Mia Amor Motley a liberator? But let's go on to Persad-Bissessar, and she is the current Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And her speech was about the drug cartels in a war on drugs and gangs. This is coming from the Newsday. Kamla tells UN, fight fire with fire. This is what Kamla Persad-Bissessar is suggesting, that she's launching a war on drug cartels. Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar says Trinidad and Tobago fully supports US President Donald Trump's war against drug cartels and criminal gangs in the Western Hemisphere. Persad-Bissessar said this threat demands that TT and all democracy-loving nations fight fire with fire within the boundaries of the law. Now, it's interesting that she stressed that we should fight fire with fire within the boundaries of the law. But whose law? That is what we need to talk about. Within the boundaries of our domestic laws, within the boundaries of international laws, or within the boundaries of the laws, the subjective laws that they have crafted. All right? That is what we have to ask. We can't just look at words and just think that the words mean what we think they should be. We have to delve a little deeper and ask ourselves the question, are they talking about the laws that we have in our societies, that should govern our societies, or sovereign societies, if we have at all any sovereignty left? But you will decide that, won't you? Now, to this end, she pledged TNT's support for a US Panama-led initiative to create a gang suppression force, GSF, to combat criminal gangs in Haiti. Persad-Bissessar also lamented the Caribbean is no longer a zone of peace because of the dangers posed by transnational criminal organizations such as criminal gangs and drug cartels. So Persad-Bissessar, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, is intimating that the Caribbean is no longer a zone of peace. It means, therefore, that she has officially declared the Caribbean as a zone of war, in which we have to wage war, just like Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica. She's declaring war, and he also, on gangs. Gangs for Jamaica, cartels for the Trinidadians. The gangs, as Andrew Holness is suggesting, is causing mayhem in Jamaica and about to take over the government, just like what is happening in Haiti. In Trinidad and Tobago, we're hearing that the cartels, primarily coming from Venezuela, that's what they have alleged, is creating mayhem there. And if they are dismantled, then we'll have zones of peace. But until these gangs and drug cartels are dismantled or fully eradicated, it means, therefore, that we are not going to be able to live in a zone of peace. This is what they are suggesting. Okay? But what are the consequences? What will be the collateral damage before this peace can be achieved? Right? Remember now that the Bible tells us that when they say peace, peace, then sudden destruction cometh, and they shall not escape. So we know that we're living in a time, in an era, when our governments, while they're waging wars, and war is a racket, it's an industry, it's a business, while they're waging war, they're going to tell us that they're waging wars because they want peace. And we've seen the playbook before. We've seen what is happening in the Middle East. We saw what happened in Iraq, what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Syria, in Libya, in just a plethora of countries over the years. And still, we have not learned our lessons. Still, we elect these warmongering leaders, political leaders, and we believe in the far vision that they have, explained and narrated to us. We still behave like children, wayward children, And when are we going to really grow up and become intellectually mature? When are we going to do that? Okay. Now, interestingly, the experts push back on Kamla's war on the drug cartels, and this is coming from Trinidad Express. It's very hard to open here. I don't know what's going on with my computer this morning. Experts push back on PM Caribbean not at peace. Right? Prime Minister's Kamla Persad-Bissessar's statement to the United Nations that the Caribbean is no zone of peace has garnered differing views from analysts and international relation experts, with one supporting her position and others saying her remarks required further explanation and clarification. On Friday, the Prime Minister, while speaking at the United Nations meeting in New York, argued that the Caribbean was no zone of peace and expressed gratitude to United Nations President Donald Trump for the U.S. military presence in the region to combat narco trafficking. And I quote, this is what Mrs. Persad-Bissessar said, quote, "The notion that the Caribbean is a zone of peace has become a false ideal. The reality is stark. No such peace exists today," unquote. Now, to an extent, she might be correct. But the fact of the matter is that who is creating the social and economic and political disorder that we see in the Caribbean? Who is responsible for the creation of this chaos? Right? The financial and the political elites, the oligarchs of our respective countries. And they're not launching a war on them. They're going to launch a war on you and I, who have not created, have nothing to do with the creation of these monsters. Okay? So these are the things I'd like to say. Do you want the Caribbean to become a zone of war in which we're going to end up like what we see in Afghanistan, what we're seeing in Israel and Palestine? Or do we want to remain with all our chaos, with all what is happening? We can, of course, work towards, reducing crime and violence, discussing what is causing or what is behind the drug cartels. And we have to unpack uncomfortable truths, not what we're hearing in the media, not the narratives that are rendered at our university centers, but knowledge that is true and that will empower us, enlighten us, that we can stand up to what our political leaders are doing. Because in fact, if we do not stand up now, then we are going to have to live and face the consequences of war. And that war has just begun. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos. The videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. And also, for those of you who'd like to make your monetary contributions, you can send it to my Cash App. And my Cash App address is the $MZ Talk 9. MZ, the MZ or Z, Talk 9, where you can make your financial contributions. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in another video. Remember now to like and to share and to subscribe. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers by next month. Can we? I'm sure we can.